for the past 10 years to undercut competition and maintain monopolies, they're probably going to like the idea of $5.5 trillion in free money. I think they'd want it regardless, but they're desperate for it. And Elon is a great example. So if you don't know, a PAC is a political action committee. It's an organization that works to lobby the government for a specific interest. And there are a lot of different PACs for different purposes. But a super PAC is a PAC that's allowed to be openly run by corporations and are also allowed to donate unlimited amounts of money to political candidates. Everyone else has to play by, a great example, election rules. If you don't know, super PACs get a pass. Elon Musk's super PAC is called America PAC, which I keep shortening in my head to AmeriPAC, which is a different PAC. America PAC was founded shortly after the Washington Post reported insider information that Elon Musk was planning to donate around $45 million a month to the Trump campaign. This would have been among the largest individual donations across the political aisle this election. And before you know it, Elon said, no, actually, I'm not doing that. I'm doing something else. And while Musk's name is nowhere directly on the super PAC, he has claimed to have created it and is apparently funding it with lower level donations. Only he knows what any of that fucking shit means. America PAC seems to be bankrolling a lot of different aspects of the Trump campaign, but it seems to be mainly focused on campaign events, advertisement, and canvassing. The super PAC itself is being funded by venture capital, big tech, as well as capitalist billionaire entrepreneurs like the Winklevoss twins and Antonio Gracias, and millionaire entrepreneurs like Joe Lonsdale. America PAC is also seemingly being run by ex-Ron DeSantis campaign aides, which is a really funny reminder that Elon Musk initially supported Ron DeSantis for president. I just want everyone to make that clear. Elon Musk thought Ron DeSantis would be a good president, would be electable. They should have nominated him. They should have done it. It would have been so funny. So far, it seems like America PAC has spent $44.8 million in total. $11.9 million against Harris, $8.8 million against Biden, and $24 million for Trump, according to Open Secrets. The America PAC website is bare bones, so not a lot of information there, but there is an America PAC YouTube channel, which is not the same YouTube channel that the website links to, but the channel I found has multiple videos, including multiple versions of the same video. Who did they hire to run any of this? So let's take a look at where this money is actually going. What do the ads look like? If the website looks like this, what else are they doing?
Gunshots heard ringing out.
What happened?
Then the former president dropping to the ground. More bangs are heard, mixed with screams from the crowd. Moments later, you see Secret Service.
My face when the former president gets shot at by a radicalized right-wing teenager. What do you mean, what can you do? Nothing, idiot. Also, if I was undecided on voting and someone sent me that video, that wouldn't convince me. What is this? This doesn't mean anything. This is out of control. They had it under control. Also, since when is the Republican Party the guys that are just like, oh, vote it away? Why? How would voting do anything here? This is what Democrats say, because they're losers. Just vote, don't complain. Who cares who shot who? Who cares why? I feel bad for the former president, and I want him to be happy. That's why I'm voting. The only other video America PAC has is just a video of Trump yelling at you.
Absentee voting, early voting, and election day voting are all good options. Republicans must make a plan, register, and vote. We've got to elect Republicans, and we're going to do it. We're going to have the greatest victory in the history of our country. Thank you very much. God bless you.
I don't know what that nasty yellow tie is, but it's cursed, and he shouldn't wear it. Absentee voting is voting by mail. I thought he didn't like any of that stuff. What the hell? That's how elections get stolen. We know this. So those are the ads that they have run on YouTube.
Hearts? Okay.
A lot of success. It's just an attempt to get people, specifically in battleground states, to register to vote and vote for Donald Trump. But America PAC also financed a blitz of ads on Facebook, and these ads would take you to a different version of the America PAC website that now doesn't exist anymore. That's why the website looks like that now, because originally you would register to vote on the website. But according to CNBC reporting and testing, depending on what zip code you entered and whether or not you were in a battleground state, the website would give you different forms. If you weren't in a battleground state, it would direct you to your state's voter registration form. But if you were in a battleground state, they presented this form that says start here. Will direct you to the right place to register to vote in your state. Now, this is sneaky because this isn't a voter registration form. It might say at the top in really big letters, voter registration, but this is actually the first step before they help you. Except they never followed up on that step and instead stole the information that people entered. And this was part of a massive ad campaign directly in the wake of the Trump shooting. So yeah, I think that's like super illegal. I'm not a lawyer, but I think that's super illegal. I don't think you can have a web page that says voter registration in giant text that isn't a voter registration page and then not help people register to vote. America PAC paid for $900,000 worth of these ads, mostly in battleground states. In March of 2024, the Federal Election Commission passed a decision allowing super PACs and campaigns to coordinate ground operations, allowing super PACs to openly share data with the presidential campaign. And I think that's exactly what they're doing. But yeah, they don't have those ads anymore currently, and they scrubbed the webpage, so I'm sure it's fine. It's fine. No one will notice. Facebook ads aren't the only way America PAC was trying to collect people's data. They also launched on-the-ground canvassing operations, which is another way of manually data harvesting. But unfortunately for the Trump campaign and for America PAC, their canvassing operations haven't exactly gone according to plan. They hired a vendor called Infield Strategies to help them with on-the-ground efforts and spent $15 million by the time they decided to abruptly cut ties, literally stranding campaign staff across the country, and that's hilarious. I mean, that's just funny. If you're volunteering on the ground, door knocking for Donald Trump, you kind of deserve that. You should think about what you're doing. God is mad at you. And so it seems that America PAC wants to restructure their canvassing operations internally, even though they already hired somebody to help them and spent $15 million on that. But I can't help to understand the multi-dimensional machinations of the world's smartest business genius.
Shit.
Too smart for any of what he does or says to make sense or happen ever. I personally think the entire purpose of America PAC is Elon Musk cabinet position in the potential Trump administration. And Trump has seemed pretty open to the idea. After picking JD Vance, I guess he has to go with literally anyone he can get to get people excited about his campaign again. Even a guy who was polling at 2.8%.
You weren't ever on Jeffrey Epstein's jet, were you?
I was on Jeffrey Epstein's jet 2 times.
Get him on board. Let's see what happens. It reeks of desperation. And that kind of desperation, combined with the kind of power Elon Musk already has and the kind of power Trump is seeking, is a recipe for disaster. Allying with Elon Musk will certainly not help Trump's uphill battle on how visibly anti-union he is. This is the guy that literally laughed alongside Elon Musk about firing striking staff en masse.
You're the greatest cutter. I mean, I look at what you walk in and you just say, you want to quit? They go on strike. I won't mention the name of the company, but they go on strike and you say, that's okay, you're all gone. I want to close up Department of Education.
This is part of the reason JD Vance is getting booed for saying they're pro-union.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Well, President Trump and I are proud to be the most pro-worker Republican ticket in history, and I want to talk about why we're fighting for working people, why we're going to fight for unions and non-union alike. Now, Elon Musk having any institutional oversight is bad, demonstrably. He's irrational, vindictive, and a little stupid. He's a lot like Trump in a lot of ways, especially in the way that he'll bend the rules, even of American election law, to the absolute maximum extent in order to get ahead. And I hope Democrats are prepared for more electioneering tactics and election subversion. I don't know what they're going to do about it. Probably nothing. I hope one day something is done about this horrible system that I hate. Billionaires have an outsized influence on our elections, and Donald Trump is providing as much incentive as he can to tip the scales in his favor. There's not really a floor to how corrupt these people are. They're all doing this out in the open. But with that corruption, thankfully for me, comes incompetence. At least in the case of Elon Musk. And here's hoping he abandons at least a few more campaign staff in random small towns across the country.
I think it dropped a little bit.
Over. Thank you for your service. That's a real patriot. I also think Trump sees this incompetence. He has to. But I personally think the margin for error in this election is a lot more narrow than before.
Hello, if you're there.
Just about anybody who likes him and has something to offer.
Feel free to chat.
It's dangerous, and this does not stop with Elon Musk. According to a
just chilling.
ProPublica, Ziklag, a Christian charity
another video
listed as a nonprofit 501c3 that is mostly funded by conservative Christian billionaires, is now pouring money into battleground states like Arizona and even aiming to use AI programs to
2 minutes left.
Challenge voter eligibility in order to purge voter rolls, all for the explicit purpose of advancing Christian nationalism. The only way they can.
Ziklag, the news outlet's ProPublica documented, obtained thousands of Ziklag's internal files, and found the group has divided its 2024 activities into 3 different operations: Steeplechase, which uses churches to get out the vote, and Watchtower, which aims to rally voters around opposition
but I can
to
sell it.
transgender rights. The third operation,
do I
called
need?
Checkmate, focused on funding so-called election integrity groups. ProPublica reports Ziklag's mission is to take dominion over 7 spheres of
This will
public
do
life,
chips,
which
but
it calls mountains: business, science and technology, family, arts and media,
I might get a
church, education,
fucking
and government.
And the more Trump aligns himself with
knife
billionaire
guy
donors
or,
that demonstrably refuse
swashbuckler.
democracy in favor of trickle-down institutional
would help.
Christianity, just force all American institutions to abide
Yeah,
by
I don't know.
nationalist Christian values. Profit. Everyone will be Christian and racist, and then it'll be fine. The more Trump exposes his campaign as the
Before I start,
desperate,
let's pick the next
power-hungry, and
vid.
anti-working class sham that it is. Whether or not voters will actually see him for what he is, I guess we'll have to see. But thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, just let me know. If you like this video, please click the like button.
Let's watch the wisecrack.
Election season is ramping up in America, and boy oh boy is the rhetoric getting hot. And we're not just voting for a president, we're casting our ballot for the future of democracy, for the very concept of freedom, for the fight against fascism.
And the freedom that unlocks all the others the freedom to vote.
Now, some of this rhetoric is motivated by fears about Project 2025.
They want to not just stop the fixing of the problem, right? They want to revert back to the eras when we ignored the problem. And that's a lot of what's contained in Project 2025.
A legislative agenda which aims to resurrect a law from the 1800s which would ban abortion and throw healthcare providers in jail, make pornography illegal. Oh, a bunch of sad little gooners out there if that happens. They also want to maintain a biblically based, social science reinforced definition of marriage and family.
Comstock is this law from 1873, a law by this notoriously prudish anti-vice crusader who kind of took pride on hounding people to their deaths in some cases and imprisoning people, burning books.
And then they also want to finish Trump's border wall complete with a military-style patrol.
His two major promises on immigration are to build a wall and to carry out the largest deportation operation in the history of the country.
Now, the plan argues that illegal immigration should be ended, not mitigated, the border sealed, not reprioritized.
We are going to close the border as a country.
This has a lot of Americans afraid that a second Trump presidency could lead to full-on fascism. Some of these fears were recently shared by our friends across the pond, with the UK's Conservative Party and France's National Rally Party offering similarly bleak policies, focused on deporting migrants and sealing off borders. But in a move that honestly might give some Americans hope, both the UK and France managed to avoid right-wing victories and a potential slide into fascism. In France, a left-wing coalition defeated the far right, led by Marine Le Pen, which has been hailed as a defeat of fascism at the ballot box. Similarly, a landslide victory for the UK's Labour Party has been described as a beacon of hope for progressives worldwide. With the specter of Trump linked to the growing threat of fascism in the United States,
it's not enough to call Trump and those promoting his ideas authoritarians, when what they are really advocating is something far worse: fascism.
Many are hoping to replicate the apparent success in Europe by defeating Trump and, by proxy, fascism.
You deserve to know that the 2024 race will indeed come down to who's going to trip and fall and who's going to kill American democracy.
But even if fascism was defeated at the ballot box, it seems to have quickly returned to the streets. Okay, before we dive in, I want to give a shout out to this video sponsor, Private Internet Access. Private Internet Access is a VPN. If you don't know what that is, whenever you're browsing online, your device is transmitting tons of information that can be viewed by hackers or anyone else looking to make money off your data. Now, a VPN, a virtual private network, keeps your data secure while you're browsing. Think about it this way, you wouldn't go to the beach without sunscreen because you'd get burned. And in this case, having Having a VPN is like having SPF for your data. I'm a huge fan of VPNs, not just for safety, but because they're also fun. Now, I used to live in the UK and I still have a lot of TV shows there, but I can't watch them.
I'll just fast forward a bit. I'll let it play.
Internet access, I can tell the internet that I'm actually in England, so then I can watch my favorite British quiz shows. And private internet access isn't just for your computer. You can use it on a ton of different devices and all platforms, including Windows, Mac OS, Linux, Android, and iOS. Plus, there's no limit on the number of devices. So with one subscription, you can protect your entire household. Best of all, private internet access never records your data. They have a strict no logs policy, putting them head and shoulders above all other VPNs. Now, when you click the link in the description, you're gonna get private internet access for 83% off the regular price, plus 4 extra months of protection free, which is just $2.03 a month, plus those 4 extra months for free. Stay safe when you're on the internet with private internet access. Now, let's get back to the show. Streets. In the last few weeks, the UK has been rocked by a series of far-right riots. Sparked by a gruesome murder, far-right and fascist rioters blamed migrants and Muslims and attacked and set fire to a mosque. This was followed by days of violent street mobilization.
I don't think this run is gonna do it.
And setting fire to a hotel housing migrant families. But while mobs have been heard chanting former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's "Stop the Boat" slogan, it was not just the right-wing political parties who played into this rhetoric. While the Labour Party has condemned the riots and set up a standing army of police, Labour itself veered far to the right on immigration during the election. It used the same
pulling my dick off
its manifesto to uphold national security, while the now Prime Minister Keir Starmer came under fire for singling out Britain's Bangladeshi community for targeted deportations. In the wake of the riots, Labour Party veteran Dame Margaret Hodge declared that we're too frightened to talk about immigration while advocating for tightening border controls. And this isn't a uniquely European phenomenon. Writing about the DNC for Vox, Christian Paz noted that the Democratic Party has swung far to the right on immigration policy.
Last year, Joe and I brought together Democrats and conservative Republicans to write the strongest border bill in decades. The Border Patrol endorsed it.
The convention even had a Border Patrol officer as a featured speaker.
Now, Kamala, on the other hand, has been fighting border crime for years.
And of course, for anyone who watched the final speech, presidential candidate Kamala Harris had this to say.
I gotta score some twos.
And let me be clear.
Gotta score some twos.
I know the importance of safety and security, especially at our border.
Well, it can be tempting to view anti-immigrant
this isn't it, I can tell.
It is a very sad thing for our country. It's poisoning the blood of our country.
The case in the UK might tell us something slightly different. Instead of an opposition between far-right and neoliberal approaches to immigration, there appears to be significant crossover. While the Labour Party and the Democrats condemn far-right racism, well, they still call for tightly controlled borders in the name of national security. So today, we're going to show how there's increasingly less daylight between far-right and liberal positions on immigration, and how this might make the threat of fascism more immediate than we like to admit. Now, anti-immigrant sentiments are nothing new in America. Under Obama, Central American families seeking asylum were detained in camps. Under Trump, this escalated into the infamous family separation policy, which resulted in migrant children being kept in cages under dire conditions. Sadly, this wasn't surprising due to Trump's campaign rhetoric.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
When you think about it, build that wall, stop the boats, almost seem like transatlantic cousins. And despite the rolling back of Trump-era border policies, the number of people being detained in private migrant detention centers has surged during Biden's presidency. These are basically prisons where migrants fleeing persecution face the same grim conditions as convicted felons, including solitary confinement and torture. And thus far, Harris seems happy to continue these policies. Now, across the board, Democrats haven't hesitated to co-opt right-wing rhetoric in their bid to be seen as tough on immigration. And of course, this isn't exclusive to America. Anti-immigration policy has been a central pillar of far-right politics for over a century, with many high-profile far-right and neo-fascist movements in both America and Europe organizing around a rejection of globalization and the supposed floods of immigrants that it might bring. Immigrants, they say, threaten the very foundations of the state. British neo-fascist groups like the English Defence League and Britain First opposed the so-called Islamification and forced multiculturalism generated by mass migration, supposedly co-signed by liberal elites. Such groups view immigrants, and non-migrant Muslim folks for that matter, as a threat, imagining a perpetual standoff between the white civilized British and some barbarian other. For the far right, the sacred ideal of the nation is paramount, and threats to its national character demand an extreme, even violent response. But they're not alone in their scaremongering. The European Union, too, has for a long time purposely fostered a hostile environment for immigrants and asylum seekers, dubbed Fortress Europe. It's a collection of state and EU policies, including building physical walls along Europe's borders, making asylum crossings more difficult and dangerous, and funding the proliferation of migrant camps in places like Calais, France. Now, in the UK, a cartoonishly villainous plan by the Conservatives to fly asylum seekers to Rwanda for processing was delayed long enough by courts and, solidarity activists to be scrapped by the new Labour government. But the new administration's stance on immigration isn't that different. In the days following their victory, the Labour Party announced that it was repurposing the flights originally scheduled for the Rwanda scheme to return 46 failed asylum claimants to Vietnam and Timor-Leste. Meanwhile, Labour's manifesto includes things like launching a dedicated border force. Moreover, several undocumented food delivery drivers recently reported a massive police crackdown, which was confirmed to be the result of a direct order from the new Labour government. Sadly, it seems like the UK and the US share more than just a love of lagers and fried foods. There is currently a labor shortage hitting the US, with the manufacturing sector alone down roughly 1.4 million workers since the pandemic started. And both the US and Europe are experiencing labor shortages in agriculture. Now, some scholars have argued that the solution to these problems is opening borders and improving labor protections. But neoliberal policy wonks don't find such evidence-based policy compelling. Instead, across the mainstream political spectrum, hostility to immigration rages on. So why do parties with ostensibly diametrically opposed political views both treat immigration as an imminent threat to the national security of the state? Why is this the one thing they all seem to agree on? Not too long ago, passports weren't even required to cross national borders. It wasn't until the wake of World War I that the short-lived League of Nations even introduced standardized passport control. Yet, we barely ever stop to question why we need passports, or how the world got sorted into distinct territorial states. We kind of just accept that states have borders, and don't think much about the massive infrastructures of policing and violence needed to enforce them. It's hard to even think about a world without borders, unless we're John Lennon.
Lennon, more like it.
Management of populations has become so embedded into the organization of social life that the Cameroonian philosopher Achille Mbembe was able to sardonically imitate European policymakers. He says, "We must close the borders, filter those who make it across them, process them, choose who we want to remain, deport the rest." Mbembe sums up what he calls the necro-political border regime. Now,
well, you can't say that.
Politics is Mbembe's expansion on Foucault's concept of biopolitics, which, in the most simple terms possible, is the idea that politics is largely about the management of bodies. I'm not sure if this is true, but I think we did a video for Christmas
Play only one hand type
on Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer that was about Foucault and biopolitics. So if you want to know more, watch the video on Rudolph. For Mbembe, necropolitics
how about only one hand?
Another government responsibility. Excluding certain populations and consigning them to conditions closer to death. His description of Europe could be an ad for Fortress Europe. Or take the United States' own border, a violent security infrastructure which filters in specific migrant populations who may be useful to the global north while excluding those deemed surplus, resigning them to places
where Joker?
Death is maybe waiting for him. Just think about the cages and prisons holding immigrants on the U.S. southern border.
Sure, I like to live dangerous.
47,000 migrants being held in camps around Europe as of 2019. For Mbembe, this process makes the border a central tool for recreating racial division in the global north. Several scholars, including David Harvey, Brown, and Wolfgang Streck, have argued that racial logic within neoliberal states is not a necessary feature of neoliberal logic, but a vestige of older racist regimes. They argue that hostility to immigration and the persistence of racist border politics, camps, and prisons is counter to the neoliberal drive to open borders and allow the flow of free labor for ready exploitation. Viewed this way, the irrational shadow of long-standing racism is preventing the UK and Europe from, maybe solving their labor shortages. However, scholar Arun Kunani points out that while neoliberalism is obsessed with a kind of economic rationality, it also contains other multitudes, like racism. For example, early theorist of neoliberalism, Friedrich Hayek, insisted that market logic isn't
I almost went real silly there,
but is the direct product of the Anglo-Saxon West superior cultural evolution. If that was true, wouldn't the food be better? Hayek argues that this advanced European culture must be protected from barbarian outside forces which would undermine its superiority. Like Mbembe, Kunani argues that under neoliberalism, race is a tool used to selectively include and exclude populations depending on how exploitable they are. It's a means of organizing the division of labor between the global north and global south, allowing powerful northern capital to selectively filter cheapened, precarious, super exploitable laborers. Like U.S. agriculture, which allows precarious employment to a select group of immigrants under punishing conditions with little ability to collectively organize, lest they risk deportation. So rather than being in contradiction with neoliberalism, hard borders, anti-immigrant policies, and inflammatory rhetoric can be essential features. Now, this system protects the integrity of the Anglo-Saxon market society from non-Western outsiders, and allows local capital to cut labor costs thanks to racialized immigration status. Now, if border control was loosened and migrants were suddenly able to claim rights and protections, then both features would be compromised. Racializing borders is essential to organizing exploitable labor, which is necessary for the construction of the neoliberal state. Neoliberal state just meaning places like the United States, England, France, Germany, all those type places where our culture involves a lot of, global businesses, Starbucks, Burger King, capitalism, things like that.
Whoa, literally no hand here, baby.
Now, precarious immigration doesn't only recreate racial divisions, it also maintains patriarchy. Scholars David McNally and Sue Ferguson point out that U.S. immigration policy since NAFTA has simultaneously criminalized border crossings while hiring ever more illegal immigrant labor.
And if passed, the Senate bill, as currently written and is hitting the floor, would put in place the toughest border enforcement plan that America has ever seen.
A core drive of capitalism is to reduce the cost of labor by lowering the cost of its reproduction. One way to do that is through unwaged care work in the household, stuff like cooking, cleaning, and childcare. Widely known to be feminized, this work is devalued and disproportionately shouldered by women. But crucially, as neoliberalism has become entrenched around the world, the global north has increasingly used the racializing border system to exploit migrant women into providing cheap reproductive labor. As women in the global north are expected both to work and be carers in the home, they've been encouraged in different ways to outsource household reproductive labor to migrant women. For example, Canada's Live-In Care Worker Program, or LCP, was used to plug the hole in childcare left by insufficient state funding. It relied on women from the global south hired for dirt cheap wages. Now, unsurprisingly, these unprotected workers have experienced immense exploitation and some abuse, with some forced to work 12-hour days without breaks. From the UK to Spain to Sweden, there's been a sharp increase in migrant women providing cheap domestic labor disproportionately for white women. Now, we see the same in the US. This labor is precarious. Workers lack access to healthcare and bargaining power. Here, the very presence of the border makes the task of reproducing and raising lots of little future workers cheaper. You ever think about that? That all the stuff in our culture, right? It's like, oh, have children. Having kids is so important. You don't want to be a childless cat lady. Have kids. Well, why do they want you to have kids so much, To create a workforce. That's it. They don't care about T-ball, art class, anything else. They just want you to make a little worker with their little hands for the mines and all the factory equipment or the computer. Sometimes my daughter looks at me when I'm on the laptop and I'm just like, this is the little work box. One day, everything, you just do this all day, you do this, and you create things. And do they matter? I don't really know, but then sometimes you get to go to the doctor because of it. Exciting times. That such labor is both feminized and racialized further cements both patriarchal and racial divisions in Western societies. When middle-class women export reproductive labor to underpaid migrant women, it then devalues that labor. And it reinforces the idea that the responsibility for such labor ought to lie with women and people of color, upholding both oppressive hierarchies. So when neoliberal politicians pursue anti-immigration policy and rhetoric, it's not necessarily an irrational contradiction. Rather, it's an expression of an underlying goal to separate populations to protect the cultural superiority of market states while selectively allowing the flow of racialized, low-cost labor. You put it this way, neoliberalism begins to look I don't know, a little bit authoritarian. You know, I might even say if I was pushed a little bit fascist, just a little fascist. But so fascism is notoriously difficult to define. For political scientist Anthony R. DiMaggio, features of fascism crucially include authoritarian state practices, white supremacy and nationalism, and patriarchal authoritarian politics.
I'll be back.
Now let's go in order to see if the neoliberal border regime qualifies. If you want to play a game, let me know in the comments before we do this if you think it's going to qualify or not, with a yes, a no, or an of course. Okay, firstly, the neoliberal border regime demands authoritarian control. You know, they require huge policing infrastructure to maintain, including prisons on the southern border, or the investment in an MI5-style border force planned by the Labor government. What's more, the increased outsourcing of such infrastructure to private corporations since the 80s, which has especially escalated since COVID, means this infrastructure is frequently distanced from direct democratic oversight. It also means some select private companies are raking in a fortune worth of tax dollars for the work of imprisoning migrants seeking asylum.
That you wished you had not done work for ICE. Absolutely. Completely. You wish you'd never done it. No. You asked, is there ever a time?
Now, for scholar Ian Bruff, the increased separation of state activities from democratic oversight is essential to what he calls authoritarian neoliberalism. He cites neoliberal thinkers' long-standing suspicion of the masses as the reason state responsibilities have increasingly been outsourced to unelected technocrats and private corporations. Now, border politics may be a wedge through which further authoritarian transformations of the state occur, edging us closer and closer to overt fascism. That's right, edging is fascist. Now, second on our features of fascist politics is white supremacy and extreme nationalism. As we've seen, both neoliberal politicians and the far right have peddled extreme anti-immigrant rhetoric. Dividing and managing populations through the racializing structure of the border reinforces the integrity of the sacred national entity in the white imaginary. As Mbembe points out, migrants in the imagination of Western states are merely a kind of hollowed-out entity, walking vaults concealed by a multitude of organs, empty yet menacing forms in which we seek to bury the fantasies of an age terrified of itself and of its own excess. The global North's history of white supremacy is cemented through strong border regimes. When Rishi Sunak or Keir Starmer invoke the supposed threat of immigration, they're functionally using the same political framework as the fascist who set fire to a hotel containing migrant families. When it comes to immigration, the line between fascist and neoliberal politics starts to look awfully blurry.
They're not going to come in and just immediately go and collect welfare.
A border security bill that would have put 1,500 more agents on the border.
Now, finally, we get DiMaggio's last criteria. Fascism invokes authoritarian patriarchy, the reinforcement of traditional social roles for women, especially reproductive caring labor. Feminist scholars like Wendy Brown and Melinda Cooper point out that the reinscription of traditional gender roles for women is an essential aspect of neoliberal thought. A good example is America's welfare system, as it has been transformed to ensure that social reproductive duties are shouldered by women within a patriarchal household. As we've seen at the border, neoliberal policies reproduce these exact same ideas along both racial and gendered lines. So we can see that border policies are both produced by a deeply patriarchal neoliberalism and are essential in perpetuating it. And these immigration policies may be reinforcing the racial and patriarchal conditions in which fascism can thrive. Now, the choice facing us may not be between fascism and no fascism, but between fully or only partly realizing it. In other words, it's like, do you want fascism? There's like diet fascism, like angry military fascism, or like cool girl boss fascism, like I have a gun and I'm at your house fascism, and like, oh my god, Coldplay did this cool new song fascism. And somehow it only gets worse because the proliferating border security apparatus is increasingly going to be used against the massive populations who will be displaced by global warming. Now, this is already happening as the changing climate is causing living conditions to become more difficult, especially for populations in the global
Dude,
south.
my diet.
But increasingly, folks desperately fleeing to the global north won't be seeking economic opportunity or asylum from oppressive regimes. They'll be climate refugees simply trying to survive a warming planet. Despite the fact that the vast majority of historic emissions and the entire mode of production cooking us alive all came from the global north. And it's all too easy to imagine that our governments will react to this inevitable displacement by intensifying the cruelty and severity of an already horrific border regime. As Dakshayani Surakumaran and Brahmi Yagan argue, echoing Mbembe and Kunani, as the climate emergency worsens, the border, as a tool of social sorting, will be used by governments and corporations to categorize populations into those who can be sacrificed and those who must be protected
round
as economies start to fail and resources become scarce. Now, viewed this way, the false dichotomy of right-wing versus left, authoritarianism versus liberalism all start to feel like two sides
Face
of
card
the
out.
same coin.
I hope I get a retrigger guy.
Upcoming election between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris here in America. If both are advocating for immigration and border policies that exemplify this inherently racist logic, is a slow slide into fascism a little bit inevitable? Okay, on that happy note, let me know what you all think.
Let's try.
I want to give a huge shout out to this video's writer, John Duncan. It's his first script with us. He also has his own very, very good YouTube channel. We'll drop a link in the description, so please go subscribe and check that out. Huge thanks to all of our patrons as well. Thank you so, so much. If you want to help our channel stay alive while getting videos early with no ads,
been promoted by Glenn Greenwald, and Glenn Greenwald did that thing where the topic that's such taboo. It's a huge taboo to even bring this up. You're not allowed to talk about the motive. This is one of the most heavily studied periods in human history. Was a little taken aback that so many people were talking about this Tucker Carlson interview, because now I guess he's just going to have to keep doing outrage bait or outrage farming. He brings on like the guy who had sex with Obama. He's brought on Cat Turd, but he does bring on a lot of far-right reactionaries and even some white supremacists and neo-Nazis. And this is one of those examples where he does an interview with an individual who had previously been
a holographic blueprint. Are you pulling my fucking dick off?
He was promoting him because it was in the interest of everybody. He had written a very good, letter, an open letter, and he wanted to publish this open letter in a Substack article. So this same quote-unquote historian apparently,
what up,
a
people?
long period of time, made an episode with Tucker Carlson where he downplays the Holocaust. He talks about how Hitler was the wrong villain, that Churchill.
Can you hear me?
Was the villain of World
I think
War
you're the
II,
first person to chat,
goes on
so.
from there. Now, as a leftist, I'm no fan of Winston Churchill, and I think he has a ton.
The audio should dip
a lot of crimes
video when I'm talking. I don't have to play a video too.
I believe towards
if you must know, I am a
constitutes
lefty person.
Certainly eliminate a group of people.
So I'm watching the surfs right now.
Poor Indians and Indian farmers.
And if that's not your cup of tea, I am.
He is a monster.
Sorry, I guess.
A monster, and just the fact that a lot of the Western, I guess.
Oh, from Noah's server. Hi.
Simply won in the history books.
Yeah, that's cool.
Across the board, and are so venerated. Doesn't really give you the opportunity to examine.
I'm testing stuff out. I made this.
Winston Churchill.
I made all this layout for my stream. The only thing that's not made is the avatar art that I have with the pronouns in it. That is from an artist called Olhan.
Holocaust is real. He
actually, let me put that in chat.
Millions and millions of Jews for extermination, and other groups as well. He should be vilified. He should have been destroyed. He should have been defeated. It's a good thing.
That's that artist.
That fascism was destroyed.
But everything else I made.
And anything to the contrary, doing this history revisionism, is kind of being done by modern day, like white supremacists and neo-Nazis. Essentially, yeah, two things can be true at the same time.
There's
Churchill can be a monster, and everything Hitler did was still really bad. Like, but anyways, this led, Elon to saying
that can like shrink and get big or
watching.
whatever.
History of the Israel-Palestine conflict, Jonestown cult, World War II, blah, blah, blah. So I guess let's click to one of the more interesting parts.
Yeah, there's probably a big delay. My internet is so shit. So
I got in trouble with my podcast.
I'm not like
Will Inc. one time because he's
streaming with people, so it doesn't really matter.
His family, it's near and dear to they're Dutch, but very near and dear to their heart that Winston Churchill is a hero, right?
Well, everyone
thinks that. He really thinks that. And I told him that I think, and maybe I'm being a little hyperbolic, maybe.
Yeah, do you play any games or what do you like to do?
A little bit, that I thought Churchill was the chief villain of the Second World War. Now, he didn't kill the most.
Is this like, let me pause it. Is it too like stimulating for me to talk with the video? Wait. Cause I don't know, like I just realized I've been doing like what I like hate. But okay. Right now I'm watching Walking Dead, but in terms of games, I play Minecraft. Nice. Yeah, I've played Minecraft just a few times. A long time ago, when it was still free. Okay. Yeah. Okay, cool. If you don't mind, if I'm chatting, but if it's like, I don't know what it sounds like, so if it's too much, just be like, hey, pause when you're talking. Yeah, I don't see, I've used this to like stream on Discord with my friends, and some of them are just like, it's too much. There's too much graphical stuff going on. And like I can like, I don't know. It's different from like when you're making something, like what's happening in the thing. Like my first project in video art class in college, like it had to be like a 30-second video, and it had a bunch of quick cut edits in it. And of course, because I made it, I knew what was in all those shots, and so like I picked them up very quickly. And so like when I was playing it for the class, it was just too quick for them to realize know what was going on, really. So of course I might think that all this on the screen is good, but I don't know, maybe it's too much. I'm just trying to do something different. Okay, do I want to re-roll here? That's compatible, so, but it doesn't do the card effect. Okay, I'll continue playing the video.
He didn't.
Thank you so much for helping me out.
But I believe, and I don't really think, I think when you really get into it and tell the story.
Yeah,
right, and don't leave anything out, you see that he was primarily responsible for that war becoming what it did, becoming something other than an invasion of Poland. Or just, I mean, at every step of the way, like people are very often, I find, surprised to learn. There's a two-step process.
Well,
right?
why don't you just make the case for that?
Yeah, no, let's get into this. This sounds great. So are you saying that like Hitler would have stopped after Poland had it not been for Winston Churchill?
Yeah, there we go. Sorry.
Let's do this, you Nazi.
Yeah, I was just
broke out. Is that effectively
waiting.
what happened?
No, you're good. You're good.
You've made your statement.
It's probably so. I don't know like how delayed.
My childhood hero, the guy with the cigar.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess on my thing it isn't even unpaused yet.
Is that you're saying Churchill was the chief villain, therefore
So it's
his
pretty
enemies, Adolf Hitler and so forth were
Stalin,
the protagonists, right?
Yeah.
They're the good guys.
Okay.
He's a villain. That's not the case.
And by the way, to like the Candace Owens history revisionist when it comes to Hitler, by the way, before Hitler's expansionism and imperialism, and trying to conquest a lot of parts of Europe.
Keep 15.
USSR, life was already horrible.
Gotta scale that interest.
For LGBTQ plus people within the country, for Roma people within the country, for disabled people within the country. Like at that point, fascism had already been targeting for them for some time. I hear often that Hitler, his real problem was that he wasn't a nationalist, is what Candace Owens said, and that he actually wanted to expand beyond his borders. But if he had just stayed in Germany, everything would
I have where the avatar window is. I have my camera set up, but
may have been okay as long as you're
technically it's not set up right now, but
some family history that they can track down.
That's where my camera would be.
But wait, what are we doing here? What's going on?
But I'm not feeling putting myself up right now.
They put themselves into a position.
So that's just like a placeholder
for this, but his whole regime is responsible for it. That when they went into the East in 1941, they launched a war where they were completely unprepared to deal with the millions and millions of prisoners of war, of political.
Excuse me.
They were going to have to handle. They went in with no plan for that.
Oh,
and
my connection's bad.
People into camps, and millions of people ended up dead there.
So this is Holocaust revisionism. To be like, the reason why the death camps, the whole thing, the systematic extermination of Jewish people happened, but it was because they were underprepared. Eventually they were just so good at what they were doing, blitzkrieging, seizing, control over areas and stuff, conquering France, all that kind of stuff, that, they hadn't really prepared for the fact that there would be lots
Thank you. Be sure to subscribe and all that.
Put into internment camps and exterminate.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, people.
That's it was just kind of like you just don't expect these things kind of thing. Like this is the opposite of someone who had a very, very demonstrable plan to exterminate the Jews. That's not something that we really have to ponder. There's something that there's enough historical evidence, both from the testimony in the Nuremberg trials, from people who were direct associates with Hitler, to people who were part of the plan itself, to the documents, to the regimented systems and cataloging systems that were developed by companies like IBM in order to actually effectively do something on a scale that the Holocaust was actually done. This is not something that just happens in secret and then it's all that it was a reflex. He was reflexively just trying to handle all the prisoners of war. That's what led to the death of him. So again, profoundly fucked up. And, very, very, very strange that this person is even being labeled as historian.
I gotta switch those. I don't know what I'm doing there.
Scrolling through.
Grab the extra D.
The
initial D.
Numbers for him too. Prophecy. Things will have tipped over when
See
Tucker
what's in
Carlson
here.
looks directly into the camera at his audience and says they will call you fascist. Turned out to be self-fulfilling. What a prediction.
I need a multiplier that scales.
Here, who's looking over him is like, so if you kind of try and do Holocaust.
So I think I'm going planets.
And then it's like, hey, people are calling me a Nazi. Whoa.
I think I'm doing planets now.
That's wild. So
okay.
Wild. He knew. He somehow knew. Hitler faced calls to strikes in retaliation for the hunger blockade, but resisted.
I think this Joker will scale faster than this. Especially if I have to score face cards. Like, I have to score 2s for this.
Substack based on his own fucking, neo-Nazi shit. Pretty fucked up, though. Like, if you go here, Tucker Carlson's favorite historian was repeatedly suggesting Hitler wasn't so bad. Daryl Cooper, the historian deemed by Tucker Carlson to be the, quote, best and most honest in the U.S., appears to have a strained fondness for Adolf Hitler. Cooper recently joined Carlson on an episode of The Tucker Carlson Show. During the conversation, Cooper claimed that Winston Churchill was the, quote, chief villain of World War II because he was primarily
retrigger.
He also claimed that the Holocaust was some kind of unintended consequence of Germany being completely unprepared to deal with the millions and millions of prisoners of war. According to Cooper, millions ended up dead because there was no food to feed them, and German soldiers decided that it was more humane to just finish them off quickly. Based on the social media activity, the whitewashing of the atrocities of the Holocaust isn't out of the ordinary for Cooper. In a now-deleted tweet from late July, he appeared to claim the scenes of Nazi-occupied France, specifically a photo of Hitler before the Eiffel Tower, were, quote, preferable when compared to the scenes of the Olympic opening ceremony in Paris. This is Nazi shit. If you think the degeneracy of a Paris opening ceremony that wasn't a parody of Christianity or Jesus, by the way, as many far righters were trying to say, if you're saying that is worse than when the Nazis conquered France and everything that came afterwards, if you're this is a worse outcome, yeah, you're probably a Nazi. I can see why you deleted this post. It looks really fucking bad.
You need planet cards.
Joke. I'm just saying, that's how bad it was. The decadence of it all.
Oh my God, 2 hermits in a row.
That the shooter who tried to assassinate Donald Trump went to hell, but Hitler did not. Yes,
give me a planet.
About being the Hitler guy. If you're having a bad day, just remember that they're currently wandering around hell for... I can't see what this is.
Now I wasted so much money doing that.
Remember that the Trump shooter is currently wandering around hell looking for Hitler, while the 2 guys Kyle Rittenhouse dropped figure out how to break the news to him.
1 in 7 cards is face down. Okay.
In another tweet from June 2023, Cooper responded to someone arguing Hitler and Italian director Benito Mussolini were prime examples, dictator, that centralization of power is never a good idea. Cooper relied several screenshots of Wikipedia entries for civil wars across the world, claiming 1,000 years of tyranny is preferable to a single day of anarchy. Here, but a few examples where centralized power would have been very welcome. As Arab proverb goes, 1,000 years of tyranny is preferable to a single day of anarchy. So, the Lebanese Civil War, Rwanda genocide, First Liberian Civil War. These 2 humans were responsible for the death of millions. Centralization of power is never a good idea, never. And then, then it comes in with this shit. So, he seems like a Nazi. What do you think, Glenn Greenwald? Author of mega viral thread on MAGA voters, Daryl Cooper explains his...
Well, maybe this will make
planets.
planets.
Glenn Greenwald. On Friday, a relatively obscure Twitter user with fewer than 7,000 followers, posting under the pseudonym Martyr Maid, posted one of the most mega viral threads of the year. Over the course of 35 tweets, the writer, a podcast host whose real name is Daryl Cooper, set out to explain the mindset that has led so many Trump supporters to believe the 2020 election was fraudulent, and more generally to lose faith and trust in most U.S. constitutions of authority. Numerous journalists, including me, promoted the thread as one of the most insightful analysis yet published, explaining the animating convictions underlying the MAGA movement. That night, Fox News host Tucker Carlson devoted a 7-minute segment to doing nothing more than reading Cooper's thread. At the CPAC conference on Sunday, former President Donald Trump explicitly recommended the thread using Cooper's name. In the last 4 days, Cooper's Twitter account has gained more than 70,000 followers. Clearly, this thread resonated strongly with that political faction as a true and important explanation of how many MAGA voters have come to understand the world. This is why Glenn Greenwald is a very dangerous figure, especially burning what little influence and credentials he has left through his previous work to be able to do effectively propaganda for the far right, usually in the form of downplaying their severity. Of trying to make them seem a lot more temperate, a lot less extreme, to hide their power levels effectively. That's what he's been really good at doing. Yeah, I mean, he was just doing it at a movie premiere, not Alex Jones's film, but a film about Alex Jones, where he was just effectively acting like PR for him, rather than actually challenging him on any of the horrifying things that he did, that he would eventually lose in civil court pretty badly for by, I would say far more accomplished.
Come on, give me a planet.
As a lawyer, but people who are capable.
Oh my God.
For our Outside Voices freelance section, we asked Cooper to elaborate on his influential thread with the focus which led him to these observations about prevailing MAGA sentiments and why he believes they're important for people to understand. As Cooper notes, he does not share all of the perceptions and beliefs he's conveying, although he shares many of them. Instead, based on the recognition that most media outlets are incapable of understanding, let alone accurately describing the views of a group of people they view with little more than unmitigated contempt, condescension, and scorn. He believes it is imperative that people understand the actual reality of what is motivating so many Trump voters in their views, perceptions, perceptions and beliefs, regardless of whether each particular belief is accurate or not. We also believe that this understanding is vital, which is why we are happy to publish Cooper's essay. It should go on without saying that as of true with all our articles published on the Outside Voice, which we treat as an op-ed page. Our publication of this article does not signify agreement with all of its claims, but only our belief that it is a viewpoint worth airing. Sharing the op-eds of fucking Nazis. Cool stuff, Glenn. Good and or normal. Tucker Carlson is pushing Nazi apologia and Holocaust denial. He addressed the RNC just weeks ago. Goes on to talk about the guest. For those who aren't familiar with who you are, I want people to know who you are. And I want you to be widely recognized as the most important historian in the United States, because I think you are.
I'm not getting any planet cards.
For being really smart. And that's where you read the thread that obviously, Glenn Greenwald was bringing up. They bring up some of the other stuff. Talking about World War II. They threw people into camps and millions of people ended up dead there. The one rule is that you shall not do that. You shall not look at this topic and try to understand how the Germans saw the world, like how the whole thing from the First World War up to the very end of the war, how these people might have genuinely felt like they were the ones under attack. This is what every Nazi...
Okay, well, I've been streaming for an hour. I might be back later, but I mainly want to test stuff out, so...
To start pushing their shit.
Thanks for watching, everyone,
Such taboo.
and
it's a huge
I'll
taboo
catch
to
you
bring
another
this
time.
up. You're not allowed to